Welcome to the World Puja Network. This is Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and I am joined today by Linda Willitts, and we're going to be discussing some of the rather astonishing things that have just happened on our expedition on the Outer Banks of North Carolina a couple of weeks ago. And thank you, Linda, for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always a great pleasure.
Well, I'd like to thank the World Puja people for hosting us. This is a very exciting topic today because we had just finished having some meetings with some European leaders, the country which I cannot mention, but who are very excited about ending secrecy on the UFO and extraterrestrial issue and are working with their head of state and their Ministry of Defense to that effect. And after they left, after a week of very intensive meetings and discussions, we had this expedition with about 41 people, I believe it was, with us at the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where we trained people in the protocols to be ambassadors to the universe and to make contact with these visitors. And the very first night we were out, which the way we normally do this, we have sort of an initial dinner, and we had a place right on the beach there in North Carolina on the Outer Banks. And after dinner, we go out to the National Seashore, and it's a beautiful island that we go to that has all the beautiful sand dunes and the Atlantic Ocean, of course, to the east. And as we were doing this, we were training people in what the protocols were and doing the contact protocols for inviting these visitors to come in on a close approach. And of course, we're in an area that's highly militarized because the north of there is Norfolk and Virginia Beach and Atlantic Command and the biggest naval fleet on the East Coast, and as well as Air Force. And so we were, aware that there often at these events there's a lot of surveillance that occurs, but the group was a very ready group, and very quickly we had in the southern sky a large craft that was about 2 or 3 inches at arm's length, and that's big. If you look out the window at a plane going by, it's a fraction of maybe a quarter of an inch at arm's length if it's a 747. This was 3 inches at arm's length that was right in the atmosphere that came down at an angle. And the way it did it is that it materialized and would be this enormous sort of lenticular-shaped object, and then it would vanish, and then it would reappear on the same trajectory, and it traversed the entire sky in under a second or two.
Really fast. Very
fast. And then it looked as if it went over the ocean. And after it was over the ocean, and it appeared to be completely dematerialized, there emerged from the ocean an energetic field that had within it this very bright light that began to signal to us, and it was 90 feet from the group. Now, this is an amazing thing because we not only filmed this, but everyone on the beach saw it. And if you can imagine, and we're going to get into what the technologies are that permit this, you have an object there that the only evidence of it, because it's being very discreet, because I believe not only are these projects monitored, but we've often had, and we did have immediately after this event, a lot of military jets and a lot of military reconnaissance. They manifested as just this point of light that was hovering, I don't know, perhaps 5 feet above the beach, maybe not even that.
Yeah, just a few feet.
And it was very close to our circle. And it didn't just happen once. We have the videotape of this. It appeared at least 100 times over the following hour. And the encounter was really, really intense for everyone there because you have an extraterrestrial vehicle that is on the beach signaling like this. The craft itself is mostly dematerialized, and yet there are these energy forms moving around it. This is why old man McDonnell Douglas named his Phantom Works when he was, because it's like a phantom sort of a phenomenon. And, as this event happened, I mean, Linda might want to share what she saw during this. I mean, it was just very, very interesting, because what it was saying to me was, we're wanting to do this type of contact event for a major world power. And we had just decided we would do this in the coming year with one of the major G7 countries, and officially. And what this was saying to me is that the visitors are ready to do it, even with a group of people that haven't had 10 or 20 years of experience doing these sort of experiments and expeditions, which we've done with CSETI. And by the way, you can go to CSETI.org and see about these programs, these training programs that we do to make contact with these visitors. So what this was saying to me was that, we can do this even though it's a brand new group of people that had never been together. We had literally met each other 2 hours before, and here this enormous craft flies in from space, traverses the entire sky, crystal clear sky, and then dematerializes but manifests as this light on the beach there for an hour, signaling and communicating. Of course, the communication was all in thought forms and what have you, and it gets kind of way out there what happens when you're dealing with an interstellar civilization. But this was something that I thought was a really encouraging sign and evidence from them that they were saying, yeah, we're ready if you guys are. It was really quite remarkable, and I know it was a life-altering event for everyone who saw this event take place.
Well, it was astounding, because usually something like that happens maybe towards the end of the week when we've all been together and out in the field getting used, the new people getting used to it. And this just started taking place, and people could see the light flashing literally with their naked eyes. It was material enough that anyone who was looking could see it, and it was intermittently flashing. But I also was looking through the night vision camera of the fellow that was filming it, and it even flashed more times that weren't as obvious to the naked eye. And also, there was more than one point of light flashing out there. There were 2 and possibly even 3. And with the naked eye, you could see color variations in the different flashes as well. I saw kind of an amber orangey color and a more bluish kind of teal color, for sure. It was just astounding. And what was so remarkable was it was between the surf and our circle. It was on the beach, and we stepped it off a few days later, and it was about 90 feet away from our circle. So, that's really close. It was really amazing.
Right, and there was a lot that could be seen that was more what they call neutrino light. I guess the mystics would call it an aura, a sort of an energy field that was fluxing all around this object. Which is very hard to image with a camera, but which you can definitely see. That was this enormous craft. And, of course, I've explained this before, that, if you're going faster than the speed of light, you're not going to be visible in the visible spectrum. And if you're an interstellar civilization, you can't get from another star system to here at anything less than the speed of light. And, therefore, it's axiomatic that the manifestations of these extraterrestrial interstellar civilizations are going to be these really anomalous and very unusual sort of events. But this was one where the entire craft itself, as it flew in very quickly, was seen by about a third of the group. Some of the other people were facing in the wrong direction. And what was interesting, the reason they were facing in the wrong direction is that in the opposite section of the sky, in the north and northwest, there were 24 brilliant white objects that were in space that were set up as sort of a protective flotilla that were out there. And we have this filmed. It's one of the most amazing things we've ever seen. If you can imagine brilliant, bright white objects that would strobe on and off, that were not connected to any aircraft, that were in the sky, but I think they were exo-atmospheric out in space to the west and north of us. What I got the sense is that this was a show of protection for our group, so that this craft could fly in and be there on the beach doing what it was doing. And that is why a lot of the people were looking in that direction when in the south this very brilliant and large craft flew in and then remained mostly dematerialized, but in this sort of fluxing, pulsing magnetic field form on the beach with this light. The light, I have to say, everyone saw. It was a very bright light that would just 90 feet from the group would just occasionally come on, and it would come on usually in context of me saying or sharing something with the group. And I later walked into that area, and the experience was that as I led the group, I walked into right exactly where this light was coming on and off, and as I got close to it, on my right side, a huge white light appeared. And at that point, a lot of people saw me sort of disappear or become somewhat not visible, although I didn't experience that. But people looking at me, it looked as if I was translucent or...
To me, you were engulfed by the beings, because the beings were kind of hazy, sparkly, and I felt like they clustered around you and kind of like covered you up to us who were watching, and also there was like a brightness around you, like an aura as well, that a lot of people saw.
Yeah, a lot of people saw an enormous bright, and I went into a very high state of consciousness when this happened, and saw all these really amazing interstellar beings that were there, as well as some very advanced celestial beings. And it was clear to me that the contact was happening from an interstellar civilization that were in a state of where both their technology and their consciousness was at the level of God consciousness and celestial awareness. And it was just a beautiful experience. In fact, it was very emotional for me as I went into this area where this beautiful light kept appearing, and which was filmed. And it was also filmed while I was there in it. So I think that, this to happen on the very first night. Of course, we have a lot more to share about this whole week on the Outer Banks. It just happened. Unfortunately, we had to close the number of people coming to it, and we actually had more people than we normally do. But I think for everyone, it was a real affirmation that we're in the final countdown for contact and disclosure on this planet, that something like 80% of Americans now know that we're not alone, and that the government or some aspect of the government's been lying, and that now we have statements coming out of the Vatican and from other world governments about this. We have, the French Ministry of Defense has released 100,000 pages of classified documents, or I should say from their space agency, and the British Ministry of Defense has recently done likewise. The Danish government has just released a huge portfolio, and this is happening all over the world. I mean, the dragging of the feet is really mostly American, which we are, of course, hoping will change soon with the new administration. However, what I sense is happening is that because we had just had a week of meetings with people in Washington with this official delegation from a G7 country, and we had just had a commitment to move forward to make open contact with this country and with their leadership support. What I think the ETs were saying was, we can do this now, even if it is a new group of people. So I think something like 25 or 30 of the people who were there had never been on one of these expeditions or training. So it was a very large number of people who were there were completely new to this, and yet this event transpired even though we were within a few minutes by jet fighter from a very large military facility, and even though we did have military aircraft that strafed us after this event took place. The ETs were making it very clear that we can do this. How much more so if we're in a country that's a major G7 country that has backup support and protection rather than harassment from their military and from their official leaders in the country. that what we really want to do is open an era where there is open contact between human civilization and these interstellar civilizations, and where it's known that not only are we not alone in the universe, but that, lo and behold, the sciences and technologies that would permit an object to traverse the sky at the speed that we witnessed and then appear on the beach in a dematerialized transdimensional form, but emerging as this brilliant light for over an hour, that we're talking a whole new science and a whole new physics that when that begins to get looked at seriously by our civilization, by our sciences, and by our leaders, we're going to realize that the era of living on this planet in the state of a 0-point game of, do we have enough oil? Do we have enough coal? Is there enough resources and money in the world for the 6 billion or 7 billion people? That whole mindset of a zero-sum game is going to be vanquished forever, and we're going to have an entirely new civilization established on this planet. And that's really what gets me up in the morning, is knowing that when we have these sort of meetings and encounters with these interstellar visitors, we're really looking at the human future. We're really looking at the potential for humans to step into a time where we are part of an interstellar civilization, but also where we understand that there are sciences and technologies that can have applications where every man, woman, and child on the planet can live with abundance and dignity, but with zero pollution. Because I can assure you that this craft that we saw that came in right to the ocean was not using a rocket, and it was not using Exxon Jet A fuel, and it was not using a coal-fired steamer or anything ridiculous and primitive like that, or something like the space shuttle has. I mean, we're talking about something that was moving at just at the edge of the speed of light, and that's why we would see it appear and then disappear and appear and disappear in this kind of pulsing form as it streaked in from space. And so I will, when you contemplate this, you go, oh my God, this is, this sort of event is not just a scientific event, but it's also a transformational event for humanity, for 40-some people to be on a beach and see something like this. And how much more so when we start having official governments around the world doing this with us. And you know what we're planning to do, and this is the first time I'm announcing this, we haven't set the dates exactly yet, but this year we're going to do some big gatherings with hundreds of people, and you're all going to be invited to go out to some remote area where we're going to do sort of a fabulous celebration under the stars, sort of a laser show, and using the tones that we have from these extraterrestrial vehicles that will be transmitting out into space, and have a big mass encounter, a sort of experiment that we're going to do, and a training that will be not a whole week, it'll be just for a weekend or something. We're still looking at a suitable place. If any of you have good ideas of a retreat location that would hold a few hundred people, and that would be quiet and dark, and where we could do this for 2 or 3 nights, send us a note to our organization, CSETI.org. Linda Willitts is actually heading up organizing this for us. Thank you, Linda. And we're going to be doing this at least once, if not twice, in the next year, so that more people can come and be part of this experience of learning how to enter into cosmic awareness and remote view these visitors and invite them to visit, and then participate in these sorts of events, because the events that we do 4 or 5 times a year, the next one is in Crestone, Colorado in
June 22nd, I think, is the starting date.
Yeah, we should have the dates here with us. But if you go to CSETI.org, you'll see the dates. And then we're going to also be at Mount Shasta at the end of August, where we've had amazing events take place for the last few years. And that'll be in late August. And then we're going to be in Joshua Tree, where the Orion transmissions, the electromagnetic Orion transmissions took place this past year. We'll be there again in November. So those are, of course, week-long expeditions, and they have a limited number of people that we can enroll, because they're usually only limited to about 40 people or so. But well, actually 30, because about 10 people are staff and people who are help doing the training for me and with me. But but what we want to do is a couple of big gatherings that would be sort of a celebration and a festival where we share all these contact experiences and set up the laser systems and set up the light and the electromagnetic tones that we send out into space that we got off from these visitors when they have come and visited us, and see if we can have a mass event where there are several hundred people with a craft that comes right nearby. So anyway, we'll be letting you know when that's going to happen. Hopefully we'll get the venue and the date set here pretty soon, and when we do, we'll let all of you guys know.
I've got an awesome venue in mind.
Good. See, I'm
going to tell you about it after this call.
Yeah, we're having a meeting after this call, so I'll find out more. So Linda knows more than we can share because we haven't settled on this yet. But those of you, there's maybe someone listening who knows of a really ideal setting. By the way, the ideal setting is someplace that's very dark, very remote and quiet, but has a facility where there's electricity, and where, if possible, people could also have some lodging, or at least lodging nearby, where we could have 200 or 300 people in an open area with an unobscured view of the sky, and that would have a good climate. So, we're looking at perhaps this fall doing this someplace in the desert Southwest or Southern California or some similar place. So those of you who may know of such a facility, maybe some of you own such a facility, let us know, because it'd be great to host it there. And we're going to do a puja. Since we're on the World Puja Network, we always do a big group puja, and we teach people meditation, and then we teach people how to make contact, and we invite these visitors to interact with us in a state of universal peace and cosmic awareness. And when people get into that state, it's amazing what happens. And I have to say that the 41 people who were there this week at the Outer Banks of North Carolina were sort of there on the edge of Atlantis, as it were. The water was so gorgeous, and it's such a beautiful setting. I think everyone there was ready for this. Maybe there was one or two who weren't, but I would say that 95% of the people were ready for this kind of event to take place, and I think that's why it did take place. And I think that it also took place because we had just had these meetings with these very senior officials who were on an official delegation from a G7 country to discuss these matters with us, and who are going to be quietly encouraging the Obama administration to move forward with disclosure and contact. And the big theme of this year is contact and disclosure and transformation, and that's really what we want to be seeing happen. Transformation not only in ending the dark era of secrecy on all of this, but also transformation on releasing the fact that we have sciences and technologies and energy generation systems that would very quickly give us a civilization on this planet with no pollution, without poverty, and without any need for be fighting over resources in this sort of savage fashion that we have been for the last couple hundred years in the modern industrial era. Which, by the way, the whole modern industrial era, as we think of it, using oil and gas and coal, should have ended in 1902. That's about the time when it was figured out how to extract energy from the space around us using the Tesla Stubblefield Earth battery. And we're working on it with someone trying a similar approach right now to see if we can come up with a prototype and come up with the amazing technologies that existed 107 years ago. And the damage has been done to the Earth, and all the pollution and all the death of the oceans and the continental shelves and the air pollution and the poverty and deforestation has all been unnecessary. And I think that's why when people understand, what is the connection between what we're doing with these energy projects and the OrionProject.org and these visitors, is that they're very intimately connected, because we're not going to be able to just advance technologically but not advance spiritually and socially. And on top of it, once we reach a certain point of civility, and a certain point of enlightenment on this planet, these visitors are going to be interacting with us quite openly. In the meanwhile, they're waiting to interact with us in a cautious way. I always tell people they're not going to push this envelope beyond what we're ready for. And that's why when we train people in these higher states of consciousness and in meditation and in the purpose of the visitors and why they're here, which has to do with being ready to receive the Earth as a sister planet in an interstellar network of civilizations, that they're very patient with humans and very patient with us, but that there's only so much time that we're going to have to sort of make this transition out of the sort of Stone Age that we've been into this new age of enlightenment and a new age of world peace and living on this planet with the kind of knowledge and wisdom that we know already exists here. And I think this is all coming to a head. I think that we've done a lot of preparation. Even the secret organizations that I've had to deal with on this for the last 15 years are completely been ripped asunder, where at least half or more of them now support bringing all this information out and ending the secrecy. So we're on the vanguard of this, and I'll tell you, when people come to these expeditions, they realize they're stepping into the vanguard of a big transformative effort. And when these sort of things happen, like we had happen at the Outer Banks, it's just unmistakable to anyone who was there.
Well, one thing that I thought was really interesting was when the craft was on the beach and the light was flashing. Maybe it was because my attention was on that, but I didn't hear any military planes come over during that event. They were there before and they were there after, but I didn't hear them there. And another thing that happened during that event, and it was mostly when you were inside the craft, is there was a lovely fragrance that came through the whole group. And it was windy, and it was on the beach, so there was no way that it was coming from a normal source. To me, it smelled kind of sweet and spicy, like sort of cinnamony, spicy, nice. It was beautiful, and everybody smelled it.
Yes, it was, and it was interesting. We often have, when there are very highly enlightened beings that are nearby, we had this happen in Joshua Tree this past November.
Right.
And we had a famous filmmaker who was with us and his girlfriend, and it was interesting because it was such a powerful fragrance, and it was a windy, cold night out in the desert, and it lasted for 20 minutes, and no one could figure out what in the world is that, and I said, that's the celestial.
It was carnations.
It's like it's almost like carnations, a very angelic sort of smelling, and people say, well, what does that have to do with the interstellar civilizations? And I go, look, you can't travel faster than the speed of light among the stars. You're not permitted to, quite frankly, until you're at a certain level of enlightenment and peacefulness. And they have close associations, just like certain people do, with these more refined celestial realms. And this is why there is this ancient connection from the Vedas and the ancient knowledge of Vedanta, the oneness of cosmic awareness, and the extraterrestrial contact, and people's experiences with angelic and celestial beings. There's no mystery there at all. And that's what we're clearly dealing with. And our experiences involve all of those elements. So, we'll have a interstellar spacecraft fly in that dematerializes, and then there's this object on the beach signaling and flashing for an hour while there are these forms, these energy forms that are these beings moving around us, and then there are celestial beings that are there, and that actually will begin to emit into the atmosphere around us these fragrances. It's really quite an astonishing thing to witness.
It's amazing, and it's always delightful, and it was just incredible, and to happen on the first night was really astounding. And people were just delighted. In general, the group was, they were just, we had a long time, a good hour of this, so people had time to get used to it and to kind of explore it and experience it and talk about it and kind of milling around a little bit, but mostly the largest group of us were standing right on the edge of the circle, and we were in a craft. I thought we were in the craft, maybe the edge of it, kind of.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But you went deep into it, and we didn't follow. But that was it was just incredible.
Well, I think that the other thing that was very interesting, I believe the next day we were walking on the beach, because we normally do a walk on the beach before the afternoon session, and Linda and I were walking south there at South Nags Head, and we looked out over the ocean, and there was at least a 2 to 3 mile in diameter craft that emerged out of the water. And you could clearly see the edges of it, and it came up and it went down. And it was, unfortunately, neither of us had our camera. There was a man there who was from Ireland who was on the beach, but not with us. He did have a camera, but he thought it was just an island out there. Of course, there are no islands out there off the Outer Banks. The next landmass is Bermuda, 1,000 miles away. And it was there for several minutes.
It looked exactly like an island to me, because I'm used to the Pacific beaches where, like in Hawaii, where you really can see an island off the beach, and Southern California. And I wasn't really thinking of the geography so much, and I thought it looked exactly like an island. It was that distinct.
Well, and after it vanished, and this is what it did, it was there a few minutes, and then
it followed us, remember?
Yeah, it did follow us along the beach.
Yeah,
and I was
it moved
going,
along with
this
us a
thing
bit.
is huge. It's the largest thing I've ever seen.
It had to have been miles, because it was like a big island.
And it had come up out of the ocean. It was interesting, because the military advisor for our project, when we were here with these officials from this other country, the previous week had told us of he was in the Navy, of an encounter one of his colleagues had in the Pacific, of being out in the middle of the Pacific and having what looked like an island rise in front of them and just hover, not hover the whole thing, but just the top of it sticking out of the water, and it looked like an island that had appeared where there was no landmass, and then it took off and went straight out into space. This one actually remained and went back down into the ocean, and we concluded that there was a large interstellar craft that could materialize and dematerialize that was there off of the coastline. And this was very clearly seen by me, Linda, and by this gentleman from Ireland who had worked for a port authority as a policeman and kind of knew what, but it was so solid, he was just assuming that there were islands out there. And then later when he looked and saw there were no islands, he was astonished and didn't know what he had seen. And
he saw the little black craft.
Yeah, and right before that, well, you tell them that. That's a great...
Well, I wasn't there when he told the story, so I'm...
Oh, well, what happened is that he had, just before he saw this thing that looked like a massive island where there is no island, he had this about a foot to a foot and a half diameter black disc that flew along the beach and went straight into the water within feet in front of him. And he clearly saw it. He went, my God, what is that? And as he looked, he then saw this big, huge ship out there, which unfortunately he didn't photograph because he thought it was an island. But what's fascinating is that at this time, after this vanished, we had the sky right over where this had been. We had a military aircraft, a big one, that came in and circled for about half an hour. And then we had jets, fighter jets that flew in literally at rooftop in violation of FAA requirements right over this populated area of the Outer Banks where all the resorts are. And literally,
sonic booms.
And there had been these two enormous sonic booms out over the ocean where there were a couple of jets that were vectored in. Yeah. But this massive crash just simply dematerialized. Yeah. But it was still out there because we had further encounters with it later in the week where we would be out on our site and we would see objects come up out of the ocean and also move towards us on the beach. And we concluded that this was some massive craft. It had to be 2 to 3 miles in diameter. The distance it was out there, it covered such a large part of the horizon, and it was out 3 to 5 miles or more. We estimated it had to be at least 2, 3, 4 miles in diameter, that it had a lot of these other ET craft within it. And those are ones that we subsequently saw throughout the course of the rest of the week.
Yeah, that was really astonishing. And that big plane did circle and circle and circle right over where it was, where it had been.
Yeah, which we did film.
Yeah.
And so, the whole week, I mean, we had many other encounters. I don't know if you have others you want to share over the course of the week.
I'm drawing a blank right now.
But the week was one of, we had another night where we had the whole sky filled with this flotilla again. And
they probably at least three nights they were there.
And we're talking thousands of flashes that would appear in a very discrete area of space that would be like a brilliant white light, but and they would move in patterns. And through the night scope, we filmed these, and they would be in a certain area of the sky, and we always felt that it was some sort of protective force while there was other sightings and encounters happening nearby. We also had objects that would be what we would call like light bulbs. It would be like an object that would appear in the sky over the group and just light up. And sometimes you can then see a craft attached to it as it would move around. And so we had a number of these sort of encounters over the course of the week as well.
One of the really interesting things that happened, remember those two jets that flew in formation and relatively slow and low? And they were doing maneuvers right in formation, and it was interesting to see, but they were clearly military. And then this little flotilla appeared in the distance and around, and the jets disappeared.
Right. My sense of it is that the ETs are saying, we're going to do this. We're going to make open contact, and there's no force on Earth that's going to be able to do anything about it. And that the people of the planet need to get ready for the fact that this is going to get known. And they're completely non-hostile, but they're really, I think, saying that the time of all these sort of Star Wars games and of us targeting them and shooting at them and doing all this stupid stuff, that's going to end. And I think that we're really close to this point of what I call tilting our whole planet to quickly transitioning from the state of stupidity and chaos that we're in right now to one of highly coherent civilization that acknowledges that we're not alone and begins to live on the planet with these really advanced sciences. I mean, you look at the fact that these wondrous sciences have been known up to and including traveling at the speed of light in classified projects for decades. And, we have someone we recently met with who confirmed that Ben Rich had stated that we already had the technologies to take ET home, quote unquote, meaning faster than the speed of light beyond the stars, and that this physicist who said this, along with a couple other people that are on our team, were at a meeting when Ben Rich, who was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, the very famous and very secretive Skunk Works where the U-2 was developed, said that, we already have all these technologies. And here we are, debating, gee, can we get solar panels on our house? And can we, what about windmills in the Midwest with a grid to carry the energy to distant cities when we already have the technology so that every home and car could have its own energy source free of any pollution and free of any cost, and also free of the electric grid. Interestingly, that the date 2012 keeps coming up, but that's the date that the NOAA and also NASA are saying that we're probably going to have a massive solar storm, magnetic storm, that could take down the entire electric grid because the large transmission lines and transformers could get overloaded and burn out. And we would be basically in the dark for at least 3 years, and some people say 6 years. And this is, of course, 100 years after Nikola Tesla and Stubblefield proved that you don't need to have a transmission grid at all, that you could have a generator in your house or car. And so, the way we're living on this planet is so absurd, and the only reason we're doing it is because of the level of corruption that exists with people who want to maintain control over all these issues. And one of the refreshing things that we can do with CSETI, and you can look at this at CSETI.org is the website. At CSETI.org, you'll see that we even have a training program that you can get to be able to do this, is that we're democratizing contact. Instead of this being the domain of the Air Force, which has militarized the relationship between humans and these visitors, or the domain of some super secret project, everyone can do this. We have people on our team who've learned how to do this, who have had contact and events in their backyards. And what my whole point is the way, instead of trying to take on this 8,000-pound gorilla of the secret government, we just bypass them, make them irrelevant. And the way we do that is to teach thousands of people how to do this, and thousands of people gathering together to do it. And the ETs are going to say, you know what, let's work with these guys. And that's why we've had these encounters that we keep having. And I think that they're clearly saying that they're ready to do it if you are. And this is why the question is, are you ready for contact? Are you ready for disclosure? Are you ready for new energy? And if you can say yes to those things and are courageous enough to go out and make contact, then you should join us, because what that does is that anyone who's studied consciousness knows that the more that people begin to learn of something and do it, the more it affects people that they don't even know, that this whole morphogenic field effect that Rupert Sheldrake talks about, is sort of a non-local effect in awareness. So that when you have, for example, this past couple of weeks, we had 41 people in this state of meditation out under the stars doing these amazing meditations and prayer for the earth and for universal peace, but also experiencing these amazing contact things. This has an effect not just on the people who were there, but on everyone on the planet on a level that is very subtle, but very, very profound in consciousness. And so that as more people begin to do this, it will shift the awareness away from fear and secrecy and darkness into light and openness and contact and transformation. And that's the time we're in, and this is the time that we have to sort of help give birth to, all of us together. And that's really what this project is really all about.
Remember the afternoon you did the puja, and then you made it a voluntary night. Some people chose to stay in and go to bed early, and we went out to the lighthouse that night, and we didn't get out there till maybe 10 o'clock. It was pretty late, and it was a little more than half the group that was out there with us, and you were doing a meditation, and during the meditation you were talking about enlightenment and light, and I opened my eyes and looked, and the way the lighthouse is situated, it's on like a big grassy field. It's just an enormous, like, giant lawn, and the lighthouse was kind of behind where I was sitting. And it's not that disruptive with its light, because the light's up high and it goes off occasionally, and it's a real yellowish light. And then there's a sort of a wall of trees in the pretty much it was southwest area, I think, and I was facing it, and I opened my eyes during that meditation, and there was a brilliant silver white light shining from behind the trees, and it shouldn't have been there, and I was just astonished, and I was sitting right next to Dr. Greer, and I kind of looked over at him, and he was leading a guided meditation, but I could see that he was watching it too, and it was interacting with the words you were saying, for one thing, and it was huge. I mean, it was a light that lit from, like, behind the trees, but not maybe all the way to the ground. Couldn't really see because of the trees, but it went way high up above the trees, and then it covered a distance towards the south. Was that south? I don't remember the direction.
Well, the whole sky for about 180 degrees from east to west and going upward almost to the zenith was being illumined by this light.
It was
one of the brightest light. It was like as if you were to see, Manhattan in the fog in the distance or something. It was enormous, and it was this very strange silvery white light. It wasn't like the light of a man-made
which we've
object.
seen before in Joshua Tree. I mean, it totally reminded me of that silver light that we've seen in Joshua Tree from the ETs.
But it was very close, and
it
lasted
really
for
close.
several minutes. It got very, very bright, and then it dimmed down a little bit, but it remained and kind of moved towards the west over the period of the next few minutes. And of course, everyone saw this, and it appeared exactly at the point in the meditation we were talking about this energy coming from space and transformational enlightenment going through the entire earth and through every man, woman, and child on the earth. And it was at that point in the meditation and prayer for the healing of the earth and the transformation of the planet that this enormous light appeared in the south. And it was
beautiful.
It was very beautiful, and of course, really kind of like many of these things, I know that it reminds me when we were in Joshua Tree a couple of years ago, we were at almost the exact same place in the meditation, and we were all sitting with our eyes closed, and suddenly about 15 feet above the circle, out in the middle of Joshua Tree National Park, a brilliant white light just burst forth. I mean, it was not out in space. It was literally just above the circle. And it was so bright that people who had their eyes closed could see the veins in their eyes. And it wasn't just light, it was an energy form that everyone who had been feeling tired and what have you, because it was late at night, felt suddenly highly energized. And it was like this transformational energy that was coming out of space that came and appeared. And then shortly after that, a sort of silvery white orb was hovering over the desert to the east of us down this path, in an area that's exactly where we saw this large ET craft go into the ground back in 1996, the first year that Linda and I went out to Joshua Tree National Park. And it came straight down and it went right into that area where that's where this then, but this light at the Outer Banks that appeared was a million times bigger than this other light.
Right.
And it enveloped the whole part of the sky. And was really quite astonishing. It would have been like 1,000 lights of the lighthouse. You can imagine how bright these lighthouses are on the Outer Banks. Those of you who've ever been, it would have been at least 1,000 of those.
The lighthouse was nothing compared to it.
Yeah, and of course those lights are sort of like incandescent.
Yeah, they're yellow. The lighthouse light was yellow, and this was silvery white. It was incredible.
Yeah, and so these are the kinds of experiences that happen, but they happen, interestingly, when everyone's in a coherent state of consciousness and reach a certain level of that cosmic awareness and are doing something selfless in their meditation and prayer for the earth. That's when we find that these ET craft appear most profoundly, and they're very much looking for that in people.
And it lasted, I can't remember, probably a good 15 minutes or so, because we completed the meditation and then we stood up and we stepped aside from the circle and we were watching it as it kind of moved then towards the west.
Yes, I think it was about 15 minutes. Yeah, I do think it was about that long, and maybe longer.
It could be longer.
Yeah. So anyway, our next expedition is going to be in Colorado, and this is where we've had such historic events and contact up on Blanca Peak and in Crestone. And I don't know the status of that, but you can go to CSETI.org if you're interested in coming. We're going to spend a whole week out there in the desert and in the mountains of Colorado, and it's a beautiful setting. We spend most of our time just there north of the Great Sand Dunes, and then we usually have 1 or 2 nights in Blanca Peak, where we've had such amazing contact and sightings, and that week is one of the most beautiful experiences for people, and I think that's coming up, as I mentioned, in June sometime.
Yeah, the 21st of June is the first night of it, and that's where last year on Blanca Peak is where we saw the main stars in the Big Dipper disappear. Right.
Yeah, almost every strange manifestation that you can imagine, and we're always amazed because every year there's something new and that we've never seen before. You'd think after 18 years you'd have seen it all, but you haven't. And it's really the way that these ETs can manifest in the environment. She's referring to an experience. Those of you who didn't listen to the show from last summer, we were up on Blanca Peak, and one of our team members, it had gotten very clear, and the Big Dipper was shining right above us, and he thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the ETs could just turn on and off various lights, various stars that are in the Big Dipper, kind of like in a pattern. And all of a sudden, they started doing that. And we had our night scopes on, including a fourth generation one. There was no cloud, there was no object, but some energy force would go in front of various stars in the Big Dipper, and in a pattern, we're turning them on and off. And this went on for like 23 minutes.
Right.
It was astonishing. And but he'd asked for it, and they started doing it.
And it was interacting with us while it did it, because we started commenting on it, and then it started, like it would turn off kind of one by one, but sometimes they'd kind of overlap each other, a couple of the stars in the handle of the Dipper, and then the stars in the corner of the Dipper. And I didn't have night vision, but I was watching it through binoculars, and you could see the small stars beyond the big star. The big star you just couldn't see. You couldn't see anything blocking it, because if it had been blocking it, you would have seen a black spot where the little stars were, and they were still visible. So it was just astonishing. And then all the stars would be on again in the Dipper, and we'd remark on it. We'd say, "Oh, look, they're back on again," and then they'd start going off again. So they were, you could tell that they were interacting with us. And there was some sequence to it as well.
Oh yeah, there was definitely
like a mathematical kind of.
We felt it was a mathematical sequence. Unfortunately, that was just before we got our night scope, so it was hard to film it. And luckily now we have some very good equipment, but it wasn't some kind of pattern that we felt was communicating. Exactly what is anyone's guess, but it was definitely in some sort of sequence, mathematical sequence. And of course, everyone saw this, and there was absolutely no explanation for it except for that it was these extraterrestrial visitors were doing this, and this man quietly, he didn't say it out loud. He had just had the thought, I wish that they could start doing this with the Big Dipper and turning on and off each star in the Big Dipper as a sign that they're here. And they said, okay, here you go. And so a lot of times, another part of this whole thing is that once you arrive in a certain level of consciousness and acceptance, and doing this in a spirit of universal peace, really as an ambassador from Earth to these visitors in a pure-hearted way, you can ask for some type of a manifestation like that, and it'll start happening, and it'll happen in a way that everyone looking at the skies, there are 40 people there, saw it. It was unmistakable, and it was a real affirmation for the whole group, but also for this individual who is our webmaster for the OrionProject.org, Todd Goldenbaum, who now, interestingly, is the one who operates our Nightscope camera, digital camera that's hooked to a fourth-generation Nightscope. And so it's really quite poignant and even sweet in the way that these visitors, who I'm quite convinced have been here for thousands and perhaps millions of years, and who are guardians of life on this planet, and who have been waiting for this remarkable time where we can become a peaceful world civilization and an advanced civilization to join with them amongst the stars, that how willing they are to appear and to manifest in ways that are never cease to amaze me, and I think everyone who is there. And that's why these expeditions are so transformational, is that these events happening and having this affirmed is really an amazing thing to witness. But also, you're not just watching, you're actually making it happen. We're there as a team, asking them to make this kind of contact and to create a universal civilization on this planet with us. And when everyone kind of gets that, and sometimes it's the first night, and sometimes it takes a few days, then they're there with the bells on in ways that are just astonishing. And as I said, in ways that are amazing. One of the things that happened that was also very poignant and sweet in its own way is that there was a man whose flight got delayed who missed the first night. And he was a really nice gentleman from Canada. And he had been present during the 5 hours of Orion transmissions at the Joshua Tree National Park back in November of '08, just this past November. So he had unfortunately missed that first night where the big craft flew in, and then we had the craft on the beach with the lights signaling for an hour. But he had bought a battery-operated radar and laser detector because he knew that the ETs often would communicate through these electromagnetic devices like they did at Joshua Tree. So he had one, and he had it sitting between his legs on the seat of his chair the second night we were out. And I had said to people that something wonderful will happen for him since he missed that first night. And he, during the meditation, asked that the ETs connect through him and send out an energy that would cause the detector to go off. And as soon as he had that thought, it did. And it's the only time the whole week that there was any electromagnetic detectors that signaled out on that beach the whole week.
Oh, that's right.
And so it was like they were going to say, we're not going to leave you out of this, don't worry. So there's something very beautiful about that and mysterious. And he knew that it had come through him because I had explained to the group that when the detectors were doing this for 5 hours over the course of the week at Joshua Tree in November, that it's sort of I had a connection to this enormous interstellar complex out in the direction of Orion, which, interestingly, the tradition of the Vedas and also a lot of the ancient Egyptian knowledge is thought to have originated from Sirius or Orion. That my sense of it was that it was using my bioelectric field as a step-down transformer. So it was going in at phases at multiples of the speed of light, and it would come through my sort of bioelectric field, and then that would interact with the detectors, these electromagnetic detectors that would then beep and go off. Well, I had explained this, and he had been there when I was explaining this at this event in Joshua Tree, and so he tried it and had his new detector with him, and they, in fact, did exactly the same thing for him. So
yeah, that was great.
It was quite beautiful. And really that's the whole point of these expeditions and these trainings is so that people understand that everyone has the ability, if they're imaginative and have a sense of adventure and are open-minded, to become ambassadors to the universe and begin to interact with these visitors. And one way or another, they'll confirm it for you. And that's what we've seen happen so many, literally thousands of times. When people ask me how many of these types of experiences like we're talking about today have your group had, it's in the thousands, literally in the thousands.
Oh, and absolutely. And it's truly a communication. It isn't just an impersonal, we're not just watching the ETs do something impersonally. They're communicating with us, and they're truly interacting with us, and they interact with what they say. They interact very, very closely with what Dr. Greer says, but they interact with what the rest of us say also, and do and think. So and telepathically communicate. So it's truly a communication and an interaction, and it's very touching, really, to think. Little old me on Earth, that I'm having an interaction with an interstellar being out there.
Well, and they'll do it in ways that everyone else will witness, like this electromagnetic detector going off or the Big Dipper happening. And these were both people who had asked just mentally for those specific things to happen. And there's a lesson in that, and that is that once people reach a certain level of understanding of this, that they can be an ambassador to the universe for other people around them, and that's one of the chief purposes of these training expeditions, is that I see a time coming where we're going to need to have thousands of people who understand the principles of higher states of consciousness, of contact with these advanced interstellar civilizations, and be able to interact with these craft when they're fully materialized and in the atmosphere above us. And there aren't many people. The State Department certainly doesn't have. I was just talking to an ambassador in Washington. They have no experience with this, and this is why CSETI has become such a key entity for modeling this for other governments and for other world leaders. But why I still feel we're the most important thing is that we as citizen diplomats, bypassing the sort of moribund, stuck-in-the-mud mindset of governments, can do this and should do it, because the ETs are wanting us to and are ready to let you know that, in fact, yes, we're here and we will interact with you if you understand how to do it and if you understand the purpose in doing it, that it can't be for, it's not like watching dolphins at SeaWorld. They're not there to entertain you. You're doing this for working together with them as we usher in this period of enlightenment and universal peace on Earth. So that's really the big message. Oh, my God, I think the hour has flown by. I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank Linda for joining me, and I'd like to thank the wonderful people at the World Puja Network for letting us have this hour to share our experiences with you, and we'll be in touch with you soon. And I hope to see some of you either at Crestone in June or Mount Shasta in late August in California, or at Joshua Tree National Park in November. And we'll keep you all informed about these upcoming big 3-day gatherings that we hope to have a festival under the stars to make contact together. It'll be wonderful, and we hope we can get that organized here for the fall someplace there in the southwest of the United States. Thank you all again, and have a good day. Bye-bye.